All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the fourth part of the show, we're going to talk about Brock Purdy and the 49ers. And if Brock Purdy does get this contract extension, does that officially close the 49ers Super Bowl window? Now, what sparked this topic for me is Puka Nacua was recently on a podcast, and it was Julian Edelman's podcast, and they were talking about Purdy and the contract, potential contract extension. Now, Puka was asked if he thought Purdy, deserved the contract, that's, north of $40 million per year, or in like the high 40s. And he said, I think no, I think mid fours, saying that it should be closer to 45 million. Julian Edelman noted that if Purdy does take a contract in the mid 40 millions, it would be a smart deal for the club. Nacua said, I think he seems like a smart guy. They have a chance to still be in their window, and I think if he goes for 550 plus million, then the window closes. He said, I mean, as long as they have Fred Warner on the other side, I think they'll be able to figure some things out. But yeah, listen, the 49ers had a disappointing year last year, but, the previous couple of seasons, they've made these deep playoff runs with Brock. Now, Brock Purdy obviously took over for, Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo when they both got hurt, late in the 2022 season. But the 2023 season, they finished with the best record in the NFC. They made it all the way to the Super Bowl, and they came up short. They've gone on these runs. Now, last year, obviously, they finished in last place. There was a lot that happened last year. But, the previous 2 years, they went on these deep playoff runs with him at a massive discount, at a low price, because, he's on the rookie contract, last pick in the draft. It's not making a lot of money. So, yeah, you can afford to, keep all your guys. And, now, they've made a lot of moves. They've let guys go. They've traded people away. They traded Deebo Samuel. They lost a couple of defenders. They lost more than that. They lost their backup left tackle, to the Chiefs. They lost Greenlaw and Hufanga. They're now in Denver. Deebo Samuel is now a Commander. They traded him. And they traded Jordan Mason. And you got guys coming back from injuries like Brandon Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey. There's definitely a lot of uncertainty with the 49ers and how they're going to look in 2025. And a Brock Purdy extension, is he worth being paid like the top guys in the league? Well, not the top guys, but the guys that are getting top dollar. Because when you look at the guys that are, the highest paid quarterbacks, some of them you're like, they don't deserve it. Like Tua and Trevor Lawrence are getting paid $50 million a year. They don't deserve that. Like more so Trevor Lawrence. I mean, Tua, he had a very good 2023, but he was disappointing in 2024, mainly because he got hurt, unfortunately. And I think he could put up big numbers next year, but he's also got to stay on the field. Trevor Lawrence, I mean, now we're going into now another regime, third head coach, in 5 years. So, I don't know. But, I mean, Brock Purdy, his level of production has been better than Trevor Lawrence, and it's been better than Tua, and we've seen Brock Purdy and the 49ers go on these deep playoff runs. But, I think what concerns a lot of people is that, the 49ers have this loaded roster, and it's the same tired argument. 49ers have had this loaded roster in all the years Brock Purdy has started. And, when guys got hurt last year, they took a step back, and he took a bit of a step back as well. So everyone looks at that and says, well, you give him that contract, and they don't have this loaded roster like they've had in years past. Now you can't go and make the roster better to make him more successful. But I do think this is where I will push back. When people say that, that means they think Brock Purdy is he's just going along for the ride. But think about this. I think when he stepped into that role, and, we saw how he played in 2023, I think of the quarterbacks that we've seen in that system since Kyle Shanahan became the head coach, I think he did the best out of all of them. I think he's better than Garoppolo. I mean, obviously he's better than Trey Lance. We really didn't get to see what Trey Lance could do. Probably never will get a chance. I mean, now he's with the Chargers, so, and Justin Herbert's the starter. But Brock Purdy, I think, performed the best out of what we saw. And Jimmy Garoppolo did, lead the 49ers to a Super Bowl. But you could also say they had a loaded defense. They had a very good running game. I mean, they had Garoppolo throw what? How many passes did he complete in the championship game that year? 2? And they just handed off to Mostert, and, he ran for over 200 yards in that game against the Packers. Yeah. But I think Brock Purdy is a solid quarterback. I don't think he's elite. I don't think he's a system quarterback. He's good. He's good. He's in like that second or third tier when you're ranking the quarterbacks. But I don't think, if they pay Brock Purdy, I don't think that means the 49ers are they're done. The 49ers, I think, are one of those front offices where they're going to lose talent, but they're going to be able to replace that talent. They're going to find a way. And yeah, there might be some growing pains. They may not be as, as loaded as years past. But that doesn't mean, they can't revamp this roster and then all of a sudden they're right back to where they've been, the past couple of years prior to last year. Even with Brock Purdy on that huge contract. And, it comes down to, how does Purdy feel? How are these negotiations going to do? How are they going to go? Is he going to want to reset the market? Or is he going to want to be realistic and say, look, I know what I am. I know what I'm worth. But I also, want to make sure that this team can go out and make the necessary moves to get us back to a Super Bowl. So maybe you do take a little bit of a discount. So the 49ers can be more flexible. Now, obviously, you can restructure contracts along the way and, open up more cap space. So then you're able to keep guys or, bring in free agents, whatever. So there is that. But, I mean, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. I mean, there's still time here. But, you got to make a decision at some point. The 49ers, they want to put last year behind them, and they want to return to dominance in the NFC. But this NFC is different than it was prior to last year. Or, no, this NFC is different compared to the year the 49ers went to the Super Bowl, the previous year. You got better teams in the conference. Teams within your own division are better. The Rams won the division. You look over at the NFC East. I mean, now you got to deal with the Commanders. The North is really competitive. The South, I mean, the Buccaneers are not going anywhere. The Falcons, we'll see how they look. The Panthers and Saints, I mean, look, the Panthers, obviously Bryce Young looked a little bit better when he stepped back in, but they're still ways away. It's really between the Falcons and I think the 49ers are better than the Falcons. And, the Bucs lost a close game to them last year that they could have won. But, yeah. It's the NFC is more competitive, and the Eagles and Lions are not going anywhere. So, 49ers, they got some big decisions coming up. And, they still have the window. The window is still there. There's still enough talent on this team, on both sides of the ball. You got to hope guys come back healthy. Christian McCaffrey and Brandon Ayuk, like I said. You still got George Kittle. Hope some of the young guys step up. We saw Juwan Jennings. He played well at certain points last year. Ricky Pearsall. How is he going to look in year 2? The defense, you still got Fred Warner, and you still got Nick Bosa. So, there's still a lot of talent on this team. And like I said, I think they're going to figure it out. But, yeah, you do worry about if Purdy wants, what Dak Prescott got. That really does hurt them. At least in the short term, I think it hurts them. But let me know what you guys think. Does a Brock Purdy extension put their Super Bowl window at risk? Or, do you think their Super Bowl window is already closed? Let me know in the comments. So, we are going to take our final break of the show. And then when we come back, we will talk about the teams, the NFL teams, that have to nail their drafts. Which teams fall into that category? That is a discussion that we will get into when we come back from our final break of the show. So, for one final time today, make sure to stick around. And we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.